Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, after a full trial on the legality of Donald Trump taking control of the California National Guard and, in addition, deploying military forces to the streets of LA, a federal judge just ruled that Donald Trump violated the law and ordered him to stop. Let's start with the new reporting. This from Politico. Headline, Judge rules Trump can't act as national police chief. The president broke the law when he deployed troops to Los Angeles, Judge Charles Breyer ruled. And that article begins, a federal judge has declared President Donald Trump's use of military troops in Los Angeles illegal, barring the Pentagon from using National Guard members and Marines from performing police functions like arrests and crowd control. In a 52-page ruling, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer warned that Trump appears intent on creating a national police force with the president as its chief. Trump billed his deployment of troops to Los Angeles, starting in early June, as a way of bolstering immigration enforcement efforts amid protests in the city against the president's deportation agenda. Though Trump has now withdrawn all but 300 of those troops, he is mulling sending troops to other major cities, such as Chicago. He has also deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C., under a separate legal authority from the one he used in Los Angeles. Judge Breyer, a Clinton appointee based in San Francisco, concluded that Trump's L.A. deployment, an operation overseen by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, violated a long-standing law meant to prevent domestic law enforcement by the military, the Posse Comitatus Act. The judge's decision followed a 4-day trial last month that included testimony from the Pentagon officials overseeing the troop deployment in Los Angeles. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 bars the military from enforcing domestic laws without explicit permission from Congress. But Judge Breyer said that despite this restriction, the Pentagon systematically used armed soldiers to perform police functions. And now, friends, let's just jump right to the first few paragraphs of Judge Breyer's clear, definitive, compelling ruling setting out that Donald Trump, again, violated federal law. In the case of Gavin Newsom et al. And others, plaintiffs versus Donald Trump et al. And others, defendants, opinion granting injunctive relief. Congress spoke clearly in 1878 when it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of U.S. military to execute domestic law. Nearly 140 years later, defendants, President Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and the Department of Defense deployed the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles, ostensibly to quell a rebellion and ensure that federal immigration law was enforced. There were indeed protests in Los Angeles, and some individuals engaged in violence. Yet, there was no rebellion, nor was civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Nevertheless, at defendants' orders, Trump and Hegseth's orders, and contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops executed the laws. The evidence at trial established that defendants systematically used armed soldiers, whose identity was often obscured by protective armor, and military vehicles to set up protective perimeters and traffic blockades, engage in crowd control, and otherwise demonstrate a military presence in and around Los Angeles. In short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act. Almost 3 months after defendants first deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles, 300 National Guard members remain stationed there. Moreover, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have stated their intention to call National Guard troops into federal service in other cities across the country, including Oakland and San Francisco, here in the Northern District of California, thus creating a national police force with the president as its chief. Because there is an ongoing risk that defendants will act unlawfully and thereby injure plaintiffs, Governor Newsom in the state of California, the court enjoins defendants from violating the Posse Comitatus Act as detailed below. So friends, here we are again with a federal court ruling after a trial that Donald Trump violated federal law, and with the federal judge ordering that he stop. Will he? Or will Trump continue to send troops into the streets of other American cities? And if he does, there will be no straight-faced argument that he's acting lawfully. You know, at that point, he will clearly be a runaway, lawless President of the United States. You know, friends, it seems to me that a president loses his legitimacy. And no, I'm not pretending that Donald Trump has even an ounce of legitimacy left at this point. But a president should lose his legitimacy when he repeatedly acts lawlessly, when he refuses to acknowledge the lawful authority of a co-equal branch of government, when he repeatedly defies court orders. A president loses his status as a legitimate president of the United States because he has abandoned our constitutional construct of government. Now, Judge Breyer ruled against Trump, ordered him to stop, but stayed his ruling, paused it for 10 days until September 12th to, of course, give Donald Trump and his administration, his Department of Justice, an opportunity to appeal it, ultimately up to the Supreme Court to see if the 6-justice radical right-wing majority on the Supreme Court will again accept and embrace and endorse Donald Trump's lawlessness. That is always Trump's hope. But at some point, friends, this is going to come to a head, probably sooner rather than later, given the pace of Donald Trump's lawlessness and unconstitutionality. It will come to a head, and when it does, the rule of law must win, and Donald Trump must lose. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.